Chapter 18, Kake near Hiroshima, April 1946. On a low hill, the gravestones tilt crazily as if trying to wrench loose from the soil. It was the bomb, Toyo explains, even here 15 miles away, like an earthquake, sent to rip the world in two. Woody, gazing at the stone, says, "Were many in our family lost?" "We were lucky," Toyo says. "Only one. He would have been your cousin. None of the rest of us were in the city then." "And is buried here?" "No, he was near the center of the firestorm. But let us not talk of that. I did not bring you here to talk of that. Do you see this stone? This one? Your father was buried here in 1913. Woody looks at her, wondering how old she really is, wondering how well she remembers. She is Papa's aunt. She must be 80. He studies her face for some measure of how far her recollection can he trust. He thinks of Granny, not yet this old, but blind, forgetful, full of needs that must be cared for and tales everyone half listens to. Toyo's not at all like that. She has a monk's tranquility. Her eyes are still alert. Her face shows both the burden and the full understanding of all her 80 years or more. With great care, Woody says, "But I told you, he lives in California now. Today, alive, with 10 children, of which I am the second oldest. In 1913, he had been gone for 9 years with no word. To the family in Japan, he was dead. This is his gravestone. I show it to you so you will know how much he mattered to us here. So you will know how happy you have made me bringing this news that he still lives. The happiness I feel now erases all this war has put us through." Woody looks away, tears welling in his eyes. He stares at the stone, the characters engraved on it. When he looks back at Toyo, he expects to see her weeping. She isn't. She gazes intently at him, as if he is ready to disappear, as if to imprint him in her mind before he's gone. "Come," she says. "We don't want to linger here. There are many things to see, many relatives to meet. Everyone will want to see Ko's son." Woody has postponed this visit many times, postponed the train ride south from Tokyo, afraid of how he'd be received. Being an American is hard enough. Being a Nisei among these occupying forces is sometimes agony. He dreads those looks that seem to call him traitor to his homeland or his race, as if he sees such looks in Tokyo. What might he not see in the eyes of those who survived the leveling and the ash heap of Hiroshima? Yet that part of the country is his family seat and too close not to visit. He decided to come bearing sugar, since he knows how badly everyone wants it these days. His team's job is to break up the black markets that have sent prices soaring. The army schools perfected his Japanese. Working in civilian clothes, he has confiscated tons of sugar and then watched it disappear from the warehouses as if through a funnel that he is sure leads into the street. He came bearing as much as he could pack into one large suitcase, about 50 pounds, but he knew as soon as he arrived that he did not need the sugar to cancel out his GI crew cut and his American smile. Being Ko's son was enough, being family, that was all they saw. They accepted the sugar, of course, but they bowed so graciously, thanking him. You'd scarcely guess their deep craving. Refusing to unwrap the package in his presence or even seem interested in the contents, they carried it, like a coat in need of a closet, to some other part of the house. Just a hint of embarrassment gave them away, a tinge in the cheek of the face that such a common item should now be so highly prized. And this was a piece with their unspoken apology for the general condition of what they had to offer him in return. Entering, Woody had passed through an immaculate rock garden, its sand white and freshly raked. A hedge of high bamboo bordered it. Inside, the rooms were almost empty. A large, once elegant country house, stripped of all but a few mats, an altar in one corner of the room, a funeral urn. They had not been hit by bombs. The war itself, the years of losing, had turned the house into a clean-swept, airy skeleton. And yet, if you only watched Aunt Toyo, you might never guess the price of this defeat. She moved like an ancient, inextinguishable dignity. Her cook prepared for Woody a special meat of teriyaki fish, its sauce enriched by the gift of sugar, and Toyo served it on one of her few remaining treasures, a fine set of porcelain. She served him small, steaming cups of precious pre-war sake a cousin had brought along and opened for this celebration. Afterward, she led him to a room of clean, close-woven tatami mats, and over his protest made him accept the thick cover of down-filled silk he's lying under now, a very old and valuable cover by the look and feel of it. So light against him, it's being covered with warm air, and surely the one piece of bedding she had kept for herself. His eyes closed. How royally they've treated him, he thinks, in spite of all they've lost. How pleased Papa would be to hear of this reception and to know Toyo as well, and how proud he'll be when Woody returns to tell what a family they came from in Japan. Woody himself is proud already, and more than a little relieved to know that those stories Papa used to tell them, about an estate so broad a man could not cross it in one day on horseback, about the generals and the judges, and the educated women and the fine houses he lived in as a boy, that all those tales were true. Until today, as much as he respects his father, Woody was kept open a little door of doubt. Now that door was softly closed, leaving him wonderfully secure and stronger in a room whose dimensions were finally known. As he dozes, it seems to him a room one can fall asleep in quite easily, a comfortable room, warm and nearly dark now. He would let the black weight of sleep settle over him completely. But something rouses him, another presence, something or someone has joined him in the room. His eyes spring open. She is next to him, sitting back on her heels, hands folded in her lap, her dark kimono sheening in the half-light, and gazing at him the way she did this afternoon, steadily, intently. This time the tears dropped down her cheeks. She had been the one, 40 years before, who gave Papa the money he needed to leave Japan and to sail the Hawaiian Islands. His favorite aunt, her favorite nephew. Quietly, she says, "You look so much like Ko-san." Around the mouth, just like him, and around the eyes. There is a Wakatsuki look, right at the corners, the way the lines crease back. Involuntarily, he reaches up to touch the corner of one eye, feels the wetness there, wants to answer her, wants to find some words to knit those ears together. That gap of time, the thickness in his throat makes speech impossible. She rises. Her eyes drink him in a moment longer. "Sleep, sleep," she says, and noiselessly scurries out. He watches her and watches the screen slide shut, struck by her grace and even the small gesture, learned from centuries of screens slid shut. From somewhere a light illuminates the rich paper texture of the screen. Then the light goes. Woody lies suspended in the warm darkness, buoyed up by a sadness both heavy and sweet. He strokes the skin above his cheekbones, squeezes his eyes shut to feel what happens when the creases form, tries to visualize it. He rubs his eyes to rub away the water and begins to conjure Papa's face. It takes a long time, as if Papa had to cross the whole Pacific to make his appearance in this room. When he's finally standing there, Woody is amazed at how his stance resembles Toyo's. For the first time, he understands that crazy pride. And with his fingertips still touching creases, he marvels at the resemblance too, Papa's eyes and his own. He'd never seen it before, never thought to compare himself to Papa, never dared. Now he knows what he should have said while Toyo knelt there. "Tell me more about him, Auntie. Tell me how he dressed as a young man, how he walked and what he did for amusement. Tell me everything you can remember." He aches to call her back and almost does, almost calls her name into the dark, quiet maze of screens and mats and corridors, but doesn't. There is time, he thinks, time for all those questions.